The Executive Playbook in proud association with Hennessy XO. Each drop is an odyssey.
They're in the papers, on the radio, and on your TV screens all the time. We look to them for guidance. We look to them for opinion and solutions to our country's biggest challenges. And that is a huge amount of responsibility. But what do our industry leaders, academics, and cultural icons do and think about in a quiet moment, if they ever have a quiet moment, that is? Well, he is the country's leading education expert. He's known to cut through the nonsense and the rhetoric in a bid to solve what some might call the crisis in our education system. It is a crisis. It is an extraordinary problem that we face for the future. Today, we're talking about education of a different kind, the education of Jonathan Jansen. He's written this book, and it's part life story, part lessons that he's learned in dealing with people from all over the world. The book is called Learning Lessons, and it is by Jonathan Jansen. And what I've learned mostly from this book is what a devilishly handsome young man you once were. I'd look at this picture of you as a youngster. Where was that picture taken?
That was at my primary school in Steenberg on the Cape Flats. I don't think anybody told the girls because I was, nor was I interested. I was a soccer man.
But you were sporty. You were quick. You did lots of athletics. You had a good pair of legs on you.
No, I wasn't good at anything,
Oh, come on.
I really wasn't. But I did everything, which is why I was really grateful for friends and teachers. So you run the 800 meters, I run the 800. You want to get a chance in the soccer team, I played the soccer. But I was never first. I was never.
You were never first, but I mean,
I was up there.
There was one race where there was a kid behind, and we couldn't figure out who was behind him. You came second.
Yeah, Alec.
And he turned around and he said, "Oh, I didn't think the Latin nerd was going to be
He was more surprised than I was. And it was fantastic, but again, it showed me that if there's application, but also encouragement. I mean, this Latin teacher of mine was just amazing. So you're going to try this out, And I worked really hard and was up there in the mix. I played chess, I played table tennis. You name the sport, I was in it because it was fun. And I think that is the opposite of the sort of serious competitive stuff that unless you win, you're less than a human being. And I think school is the one place where you must just do everything.
But so few schools allow kids to do everything. Schools have become more and more insular, more and more pressured. There's the focus on the curriculum, which isn't that great to start off with either. And education has shrunk rather than expanded.
That's a big problem. And I'm a big fan of physical education. Let the kids out twice a day, 3 times a day. Let them run around. Even if they do nothing, just get them out of the classroom, I mean, what human being sits down for 5, 6, 7 hours and just focuses on quadratic equations and I think one of the reasons children don't like school is so regimented. It's so, as you said, so focused on tests and teaching and tests and teaching. I think we need to break that mold. And so for me, the wonderful thing about having a lot of friends and teachers who had this broader view was that you could just do everything. I mean, they weren't, tot and track hockey fields. We didn't have any of those privileges, as you know. But what you did have was sand dunes. What you did have was the sea. What you did have were things that you could do and just enjoy being a kid, But I'm beginning to think the worst education is the stuff that happens in a classroom.
What made you write this book, this life story? I think there's a lot more has happened than is in the pages of these books, but these are the bits you regard as most important and most interesting.
It's actually a good question. I was sitting in my study during the hard lockdown, and I was working on 2 academic books, so fairly heavy-duty theoretical stuff and so on. And I remember one morning catching myself and saying, what the hell are you doing? You're writing this stuff that a very small segment of the population is going to read, and we're in a hard lockdown. Don't you think you should also be doing something for the community? I've always had this idea I wanted to share things I did right and wrong, growing up as a kid. For high school students, because I often get students, even today, students will say to me, "Oh, Professor, you've accomplished this, that, and the other. What's the secret? Give us this." And then I decided, you know what? I don't think I've done much in my life. I've done a few things, but maybe I should write this for the kids. And I literally took a few weeks and just belted it out from early morning till late at night. I sent it to the publisher. Louise Grantham from Bookstorm said, I couldn't sleep last night. I've thought of a title, Learning Lessons, and the double meaning there is beautiful. Yeah. And it was out in no time, so it was really a hard lockdown book, born out of a frustration with just doing narrow academic writing and wanting to give something back.
But what comes through so strongly, and I think where she got the inspiration for the title was we learn so much more from our interactions with others and our experiences with others, good and bad. And those lessons are important, and also the importance of people in shaping us, and then our responsibility in helping to shape others.
I was a teacher, as you know, at high school, but I was also a teacher at university most of my life. Even when I was a vice chancellor, I taught first years. And the formal stuff that you say in curriculum theory in my field is less important than what happens in the interaction. So you'll notice with your cameraman, that wasn't sort of casual chat. I want him to know that I know his school. I want him to feel encouraged. I hope he studies further. So in the back of my mind, my interaction with the young people here is not random. It is planned to encourage them, to be human to them, to be accessible to them. And that's teaching.
It's pushing buttons and seeing what comes
out and so on. So if you become too focused on the discipline, you forget that teaching is the pat on the shoulder, the well done in the interval, in the break. For me, that is the joy of teaching. And so you might have seen, I don't know if I wrote it in that book, I visited every kid in my home class in their homes, because that was the best way to know them, to get to know them, get to know their parents, get to know their circumstances, and then to know how to teach. Every night, from 5 to 8 at night, I'd visit the parents, knock on the doors, got all the addresses. And that enabled me, as you saw, there's some horror stories of students without parents or without, functional families. And that enabled me to teach biology, or life sciences as they call it today, in a completely different way than if I was teaching at Westerford or Bishops.
And to understand the circumstances of a family as well. In a way, there's always a kid who's always tired in the class. They're always lethargic. Geez, what's wrong with these children? Yeah. And you kind of realize there's no food at home, or whatever the case might be.
And then the opposite too, because they were also comfortable middle class family. I remember one kid, he had every gadget, and he was falling asleep in my classroom. And I basically ensured that his parents made his study room a gadgetless place, He is now a teacher of my subject in schools. So you see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you learn how to respond. But it's not just doing this as a duty. It's doing it because I get enormous joy out of talking to people and to talking to young people. So it's not like a burden. It's not like your duty. It is fun.
But you describe your own sort of upbringing on the Cape Flats, miserable and horrendous.
It was difficult, because the first time there wasn't a lot of money to go around. Secondly, you were surrounded by constant violence.
Is it any better today?
No, it's worse. Even as we speak, I'm on a project to help one of the main gangsters in the Cape Flats write a book about leadership. About how do you lead a gang, My point simply is, you can't be uninvolved. This book is about being involved. But to be involved, you need to know them. You need to understand them. You need to know how their heart beats. You need to know what they're scared of. Every gangster is scared of something. I guarantee you that.
Levitt and Dubner, the economist and the journalist, in their first book, For Economics, spoke about the corporate structure of gangs and drug dealers and all of that sort of stuff. I find that cult very, very similar.
I love it. I'll read that book. The truth is, to lead a gang, you have to have a set of skills. I want to know what those skills are, and then try to communicate how you could use those skills for doing better things than killing your, rival gang members and so on and so forth. But teaching is about being involved, being sensitive to, being knowledgeable of the people you're privileged to serve.
The Executive Playbook in association with Hennessy XO, celebrating personal and business success.
The Executive Playbook in proud association with Hennessy XO. Each drop is an odyssey.
you had all kinds of your own ambitions. I mean, you said you were never any good at that, but you wanted to be a soccer star, didn't you?
I wanted to be really good at soccer.
I think we all do, actually, but you really wanted to.
I wanted to be good at something. It's very hard for people when they look at me today and they say, oh, but you went to university, you got degrees, you got this, that, and the other. But they don't understand that when you're a kid growing up and your parents finished JC, which was standard 8, that was it. And nobody in your community ever went to university, let alone a college of any kind. Your ambitions were shaped by what you saw before you.
And you didn't have the $20 for registration.
Oh my word, that was horrible. But somebody pitched in at the last minute, and that made it possible. So as you notice in the book, I asked a lot of what-if questions. What if this aunt didn't encourage me? What if this uncle didn't drive me back after I dropped out? What if Ernest didn't give me the $20 for registration? So that lesson, as you know, which is a really important lesson, is that no matter how good you think you are, you didn't do it actually. You just happened to be lucky and to have people who supported you.
I recall having a discussion with the chief executive of a large organization once, and I said, so who were your mentors?
Yeah.
And he went, nobody. I grew up in a small town. My dad was the postmaster. My mom was a teacher. Nobody's my mentor. I'd done this all myself. And I kind of went, that's quite sad.
It's not just sad, it's untrue.
But what's sad about it is your refusal to appreciate the level up you've been given by people who, a kind word, a clap in the ear, or $20 for registration.
Yeah.
Without those things, you lose your way.
I had to officiate at hundreds of graduation ceremonies, as you can imagine, as a vice chancellor, you know. And I always started off every graduation ceremony. Before I made my speech, I said, look, well done, but let's just be real. You didn't get here by yourself. So get up here, because somewhere in this audience, up there in the rafters, is a grandmother who took her pension money. And you can just see the kids starting. You see the tears. Because they know they didn't get there by themselves. And I don't care whether you are a kid from Bishops or a kid from Bishop Lavers. Let me tell you something. Okay, you didn't get there, but somebody opened the door for you.
Yeah.
Some father picked up a phone for you. You know, my late mother, who, bless her soul, you know, she would keep reminding you. She would say, "Dis net die genade. It's just grace."
But that also then informs the way you respond to the world and the way you give back, because that has shaped you into your character, which is, yes, in your professional life, but the additional stuff of writing the foreword for a policeman for his book, going to meet the gangster, and writing a book on leadership. I mean, these are extremes.
Yeah, and I mean, you everything you do every single day, you just stop and you sort of say, you know what? You got to give back. You just got to make that person. So my kids go crazy sometimes, you know, because I go into the shop and I engage the teller. And I said, this teller's been abused after 6 hours on this shop floor, you know? And so I make one of those lame jokes, you know, just to put a smile on their face.
Yeah, but connections are so important. Communities are more isolated. Not everybody goes to work at a bus anymore, walks to school anymore. People are being dropped off. You're losing that sort of sense of it from a safety perspective, a convenience perspective, a busyness perspective.
And also learning how to be. Learning how to be is such an important thing. You bring 10 South African kids in here right now, okay, you would notice all of them would feel awkward with adult conversation. You bring in 10 American kids here, they'll be high-fiving. They don't know you from a bar soap, okay? They'll be bragging about something. So there's something we're losing, I think.
But you speak about that. I mean, you talk about when you were going to do your postgrad stuff and you were going to work in America, the fundamental difference in approach of an American approach to education versus a South African approach, the conversational nature of that American education versus the sort of autocratic, top-down didactic.
No, I mean, to this day, when I do workshop with corporates, and I'd stand there and I'd say, okay, hands up any of you, when you went to university in South Africa, there was at least one professor that said, welcome to chemistry 325. By the end of the first semester, half of you would be gone. Hands up if that happened to you. And the hands would all go up, you know. And I'd say to myself, what kind of education system tells you you failed before you got out of the blocks, you know? And that was the big difference for me. The US system, with all its ills, and it has many ills, as you know, the higher education system is tops.
But they anticipate success rather than anticipate failure.
That's right. And in fact, they insist that you fail. So I sat with a whole lot of South Africans, not just a whole lot, about a dozen of them. I took them to breakfast in Palo Alto. Palo Alto is the city in which my university, Stanford University, is located, but it's also the heart
It's
of the Silicon
the
Valley.
heart of Silicon Valley tech. That's where
That's
Apple
right.
iPhones come from.
Yeah, Mountain View, all of it. There's a street called Page Mill on which a lot of these companies that we, sit here, started by dropouts mainly from Stanford. And I took these South Africans. You would never have heard of them, but they all became famous when they got there. And I said to them, why? They said, yeah, they expect you to fail. They said, secondly, yeah, you learn to work really, really hard, and you're not good enough until you've succeeded. And so I said to myself, just imagine that ethos that was in our corporate sector, in our public service sector, in our universities, in our schools, that I come in, as you said, with the expectation that you will be great. Man, that changes the ballgame. That is why, as you know, I have fought all my life against this 30 and 40% pass rate. Not because I think every kid can do mathematics, but because you start off by saying,
that's all you need.
That's all you need, versus pure math. It's destroyed us as a country. But it's not just in education. You see this low bar. Do you know why we're struggling with the vaccines? We didn't expect. No, seriously, man. I mean, we are so blind to our own, potential, that when this thing happened, because South Africa works with magical thinking. Magical thinking, we'll overcome this. How many presidents have told us? Think about this. That there will never again be load shedding. How many presidents have told us that?
Yes.
Because it's one thing to sort of, say these glorious things. It's a completely different thing to make it happen. And we just don't have that in us.
What's killed that can-do attitude? I think we used to have a can-do attitude.
I think one of the things that happened was that in our political culture, people started to get used to the notion of the shortcut. And then we got into this thinking of ourselves as the rainbow nation, which I understood at the time. We got into thinking that things would just happen because you have good intentions. So you've got the greatest constitution on the planet, okay? So things will just happen. You've got beautiful policies about inclusion in schools, things will just happen. We can't even fix spit littering toilets to this day. And I can tell you now, it's 2 weeks. Give me the money, in 2 weeks I'll do it for you in no time.
One looks at the work that Gift of the Givers does at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
And you talk to Imtiaz Suleiman, and he goes, well, you just get the best people, you go to a place and you solve the problem,
what they did
and you move on.
At that hospital.
Yes.
The hospital doesn't have water for years. You
Drill a hole.
You drill a hole, the hospital has water. Now, to go back to your question, one of the fundamental things you have to ask is, how did this really happen? Okay, so digging deeper there on your question. And one of the things that happened, I remember sitting with Jan van Zyl, who was the very famous chairperson of Toyota.
Everything keeps going right.
Yeah. And we were sitting in a board meeting one day, and we were reflecting on why we couldn't fix spit littering toilets, because we did it in 2 weeks in the KZN schools where Toyota worked. And I'll never forget that he just turned to me and he says, "Ons gee nie om nie, we don't care." And that's right. And when you're not pained, sufficiently about a kid that slipped down the toilet. In fact, you clap the kid to go and get your cell phone. That's what one principal did, okay? Then there is no manual for delivery that's going to help you because you don't care.
The Executive Playbook in association with Hennessy XO, celebrating personal and business success.
The Executive Playbook in proud association with Hennessy XO. Each drop is an odyssey.
You talk about some of the very important lessons you talk about. You talk about the lesson of showing up, setting high standards. I think we've touched on this as well. Making things happen, setting goals, and finding passion.
I'll never forget the interview. There were many occasions that I was with Oprah Winfrey, she was an amazing woman. And young people would ask her in the Free State, I remember we gave her an honorary doctorate and all of that. And somebody said to her, what's the secret of your success? And she said many things, but one of the things she said, when I got the opportunity, I showed up. So whether it is, sports or academics or whatever, when you get the opportunity, you've got to show up. And so I say to young people all the time, say to my kids, if you don't know what it means to work 18 hours a day, don't talk to me about why you're struggling, because you've got to show up. And I try to demonstrate that with my students, whether they first years or postdocs. I try to show them what it means to work as an academic. Did you know when I was a vice chancellor, I think I mentioned this, I taught first year students.
Yes.
You know why? So that no professor could tell me in the Senate they're too busy to do research or whatever the case might be. The reason I did the research when I was running 3 campuses was quite simple. Nobody could get up and say, it's too difficult to find time for research. You with me? So somewhere in our leadership, I think, we need to be able to demonstrate to young people, to our colleagues, our fellow colleagues, that you show up if you want to see change.
You've dealt with young people all your life.
Mm.
How do you address them when they go, oh, but Prof, it's hard. It's so hard. And I'm on social media and I've got friends and you know what, I'll do what I can, but really very, very busy. How do you deal with a distracted youth who kind of feel that should be a lot easier than it actually is?
So I have to say the young people I work with at all levels of the school system and the university system, I don't meet that kind of people. I don't know of a kid that ever went to school and said, I'm going to school because I really want to screw up. Kids want to do well. They're ambitious. They might be completely, I went to a farm school here the other day and asked the kids, what do you want to become? And it's, pilot, surgeon. I know it's not going to happen for them. But I don't tell them that. What I say to them, it can happen, provided you do the following 3 things, one of which is showing up. Of course, the primary schools use different language. So the kids I work with, and I don't spend a lot of time with the kids whose body language tells me they don't want the message because horse to the water. Absolutely. I don't do it. So I look at the many, many, many kids who come to me and sort of say, tell me how to do this. And I will work day and night to make sure they succeed. Before COVID, I would teach in one of the richest schools in the world. And the school where Steve Jobs' daughter incidentally went to school in Palo Alto. And they would ask me to do a week of lectures there. And then I come and I work at the school year in Nyanga, called Oscar Mpeta High School. I can honestly tell you with a straight face, there is no difference whatsoever between the kids at Oscar Mpeta, which is a gangster school, and the kids in this Palo Alto school. No difference. You know what's different? The structure of opportunity. So if you gave each of those kids the same opportunities, they're going to go places. Okay? And that's my faith in young people in South Africa.
And that's the tragedy of year after year, the lost opportunity of South Africa.
Absolutely. We've now got a school that I'm a patron of in Worcester. It's called Swelatemba. Watch the results at the end of the year. We've banned mathematical literacy. The teachers don't leave there before 5 and 6 because every day there's staff development after school. Okay, the school starts early, finishes late. And just by setting those high expectations, just by insisting that you can do well, just by giving them the means to do well. You can't tell a kid to jump high and you don't provide the means to jump. The entire culture of a school changed. The tragedy for me is it's so easy to fix our school system. It's really, really easy. But you've got to care.
What's that philosophy? So it's caring, it's showing up, it's setting high standards.
It's setting high standards. It's giving them the means to achieve those standards. And it's demonstrating through your own life, whether you're a teacher or a professor or a corporate head, demonstrating through your own life that it can be done and that you live selflessly. Young people are incredibly turned off by words. But if they watch you and they watch your example, what is one of the first things Mandela did when he was announced president? Do you remember? He becomes president, he's sworn in and so on. And you know what he says? I'm giving my salary back to
yes.
Now, it's symbolically, I suppose.
It was a couple of $100,000 at the time.
It wasn't a big deal. But the notion that whatever I get paid, I'm giving it back to you. A lot of us sat and said, man, that's the kind of leadership. Now I will believe you. Don't talk to me about your policies. Talk to me about your life.
Show us.
Show us. Show up.
What, if you could go back and have a word with this very handsome young man over here?
Yeah.
What is he? 12. What would you tell him?
It's going to be okay. Don't worry. It's going to be okay. And the reason I can say that now, in retrospect, is because of the many, many people, including yourself. You're not aware of what an encouragement you are to me. You're not aware of it at all because you just do your work. But I said to myself, here's a guy that every time I hear him speak, like the other day, there's an enthusiasm for this country. I need that. I need to see that there are other people that get excited about what we can be.
Can you, with confidence, tell this generation of 12-year-olds that everything's going to be okay?
I would say that and then add a few things. So I would say to them, it's going to be okay. Here's the road. Here's the path. Read this bloody book. Because that's really what the book is. The book is sort of saying, it's going to be okay, but here's a way out. Here's a road to follow.
Show up. Care. Raise your standards. Hold others to higher standards as well, and yourself.
And be the example, yeah.
Professor Jonathan Jansen, in your home, in Stellenbosch, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The Executive Playbook in association with Hennessy XO, celebrating personal and business success.